One of my favorite pastimes is visiting the modern military genre, a place of high intellect and engaging gameplay design. It feels like an old glove, one that belonged to someone else so it doesn't fit right and is kind of damp. I mean, after Battlefield 3, you would think that DICE would have stuck in their wheelhouse and focused on what they were good at, multiplayer. And Battlefield 4 does still get played to this day, as it was an abject improvement over Battlefield 3's multiplayer, and it was the last Battlefield to take place in the modern setting. But we're not talking about the multiplayer, we're talking about the single player. What's funny is that Battlefield 4's campaign is way better than Battlefield 3's. The levels are more open in how you can approach them, there's more vehicle sequences where you can actually control the vehicle, and the characters aren't all just cardboard approximations of the same ideal soldier. All of this is still pretty terrible, but they made an attempt, and really, what more can you ask of them? Let me stop you right there. We're one note into the introduction and you've just tried to poison my video. The song is Total Eclipse of the Heart, and outside of the line, we're living in a powder keg and giving off sparks, I don't see the thematic relevance other than a stilted opportunity to force a licensed track into the game. Alright, now it's technically considered criticism and covered by fair use. So we start with the typical YouTube intro where the creator, in an attempt to hook people into watching, takes a later clip and puts it first to try and encourage people to watch more of their video. I'm not even sure why we've structured it like this. This is a video game, not a direct-to-TV movie. Unlike what the opening of Battlefield 3 tried and failed to do, what happens later in the game doesn't inform this first scene, so it's pointless other than a cheap means to generate excitement. Anyways, our squad is in a vehicle that has driven into the ocean, and our CO implores us to shoot out the window, which will kill him, in order to save the squad. Cut to the first level where we're apparently 13 minutes prior to crashing the car. Yeah, okay, there's too many scripted sequences planned for this to only take 13 minutes. Pretty much immediately we run into a problem with the field of view, so I change it in the settings and nothing happens. At first I just figured the game might have saved my change, so I try again and it doesn't budge. So I look it up and people are discussing it online, as Battlefield 4 was brought to Steam in 2020 and people are calling it a glitch. It's not a glitch, friends. Not at all. See, the FOV has to be capped to whatever this is in order to cover up some massive animation mistakes. Using flawless widescreen, I'm able to stretch the field of view out to something that is playable. Because what a surprise in a tactical shooter, I want to be able to see things, and that immediately exposes problems. In this cutscene, you can see these frozen enemies that have been instantiated into the scene but aren't supposed to be visible yet. At the original FOV, you can't see them because they'll be out of frame at such a tight field of view. There's tons of stuff like this, and you can notice when they thought that something is supposed to be in frame and when something isn't. What's weird though is that there are object scaling issues tied to the field of view, which is a bizarre issue to have happen. Any object which is animated in a scene to be picked up or given to the player character will be the incorrect scale, which appears to be proportional to how much you change the field of view. I don't have a technical reason for this to even be the case. I genuinely do not understand why a 3D object scale would be tied to the field of view value. Bizarrely, we don't have the expected issue of seeing through a character's shoulder or unfinished gun models, thanks to the player models being fully rendered, which is a level of design competence I wouldn't expect. Some people figure that games like this are supposed to be tech demos for the engine. It doesn't matter if Crysis 2 is cheesy, it exists to show off the possibilities of the CryEngine, which it succeeds at. And CryEngine gets used by studios to make games to this day. Frostbite 3, however, is an engine used exclusively by studios under the Electronic Arts banner, so making a tech demo to sell the engine doesn't make sense because usually studios are forced to use Frostbite for their games. The problem here isn't the engine, it's the people using it who didn't account for the fact that the player might want to change their field of view in the single player. Which is weird because they're the ones who designed the engine. Anyways, look forward to plenty of clips of the bizarre world that the FOV hack created. Honestly, I consider these features rather than bugs, as otherwise Battlefield 4 would just be a substandard modern military shooter.
Fortress, this is Tombstone, come in, over! Fortress, this is Tombstone, come in!
Early on, the game teaches the player that walls can be destroyed to get through levels. The game will then proceed to never use this feature because Levolution is way more scripted than DICE would like you to believe. The game doesn't have fully dynamic destruction, it's just a series of scripted chunks of buildings that come off in response to damage, and most engines are capable of that. That said, this game does feature some pretty nice looking levels in terms of environmental destruction. That is, if you can see past the blinding bloom. These are both things I said about the first game. Honestly, Battlefield's strength is an office firefight where bits of plaster and sheetrock are flying around you. Making this game a generic warfighter where you're outside or in a metallic environment is just boring. But even with the strongest of level environments, basic visibility is not a given, as even light sources themselves become enemies. I don't understand why this game leans so heavily on bloom. It just doesn't look good. Like, look at this scene here. Looks pretty good, right? It has nice, even lighting, makes good usage of shadow and color, and the environment's full of detail. Now look at this scene later in the game. The lighting's flat, there's no shadows, the environment's bare, and everything is masked by particle effects and awful bloom. It's almost like the devs are trying to cover up how barren this level is by comparison to the early levels by jangling the keys with so many effects to distract the player. Battlefield 4 starts with a mission to recover some kind of intel from who knows Stan. You better brace yourself to not be given basic information about what exactly is happening in this game, which would be commentary on the military if we were playing grunts and not a special forces unit. After rounding up the boys and going through some harrowing events, we end in a car chase versus a helicopter. Those missiles that would turn us into steamed meat chunks in real life, don't worry about those.
Step on it, damn it! It's lining up! Oh, fuck no! Burn those motherfuckers!
I always find it funny in games when the player is scripted to fail, but it penalizes the player if they fail too early in the sequence. Anyways, 3 of the squad escape as the leader dies, and we become the alleged squad leader.
So Staff Sergeant Dunn was killed for something we already know.
Our next mission is set in China, during the midst of civil unrest. Hey, we really missed an opportunity for a totally hilarious joke not making this video in 2020 because that's when this game is set. Just before New York got taken over by aliens, but after Paris got nuked and DC got hit with an EMP. Anyways, our mission is to extract some VIPs from the city amidst the unrest, and we almost hit a couple people, only to hilariously drive through another civilian that's out of sequence with the rest of the animation. Chinese special forces have shown up to the building and we have to sneak in, and Pac here is all, "Hey, you should call Dunn's wife and tell her about her husband's death," and I'm like, close your air hole, there could be a microphone in this elevator and you'd be identifying yourself, you absolute moron. The game repeatedly makes basic mistakes about the level of discipline that Special Forces soldiers have. And this is a world where there was already a modern armed conflict with Russia, and repeatedly soldiers have these conversations like it's just another day on the job. It's entirely because there's never a quiet moment where it would be more appropriate, so instead these characters have to try and leave an impression on the audience at bad times in order to try and make a connection with the player for the in-game decision where you send someone to their death. Oh yeah, spoilers. Irish makes a point about not looking Chinese, which is basically the writer themselves pointing out that this operation just doesn't make sense. This isn't the kind of unit you use for this mission. In fact, there's already someone here that's better suited for the job, Agent Kovacs, one of 2 characters from the previous game. This is a situation where delicacy is extremely important and the consequences for a basic mistake is literally World War III, but whoops, wrong floor. Yeah, shame these obvious Americans having personal conversations near surveillance equipment armed with Western weapons got caught on this operation, would hate to even attempt subtlety here. This is especially funny when later the game reveals the man we're extracting is the leader of the Chinese Progressive Party. Considering his importance, a Special Forces team from a Tom Clancy story wouldn't be clandestine enough to touch this operation. Anyways, we make our escape and the city gets hit with a non-nuclear EMP blast, highly reminiscent of the EMP that happens in ODST. So fact-checking this. I found a paper at my major, Scott Merkel, which seems to indicate that EMP weapons would be unseen. You would only know one had been used once all your electronics stopped working. There wouldn't be a dramatic blue flash, which makes sense, as an EMP is literally a pulse of electromagnetic energy. I find electronic warfare a fascinating subject, and I think there aren't enough of these modern military games that actually explore the idea. Like many will have them as set pieces, but very few will actually show how the weapons really work, or...
Weather and binoculars. 100 years ago it would kick ass, or blind as bats.
Daniel bleeding. We've got no means. Most of our equipment went down in the EMP blast.
Damage Control Central requests that any functional personal electronic equipment should be deposited at the DCC.
Well, interesting. Unlike Modern Warfare 2, which used an EMP as a means of defeating the needless escalation of tension, the central premise of Battlefield 4 uses an EMP in order to set up the conflict of the story. We can't get reinforcements from other ships because none of our communication methods on the ship work after the EMP. It's not perfect, but it's better than one would really expect from a game of this caliber. Don't worry though, if the game seems like it's going somewhere, it's not. We take on a couple hundred Chinese civilians so that the player might feel there are stakes for saving the ship later. We have a bit of interpersonal drama, and then Agent Kovacs gets made our squad leader for a mission over to another ship to retrieve some intelligence. Kovacs, for those who didn't see the Battlefield 3 video, or did see the Battlefield 3 video and didn't realize it was the same guy, is one of the agents that interrogates the Battlefield 3 protagonist, whatever his name was. Kovac met Luis at a sports bar in Pudong, where she bluntly asked him if he would like to have sex. That is a direct quote from the wiki, and if you're curious, that story comes from the novel Battlefield 4 Countdown to War. I'd say I feel bad for the writer who had to write this, but Peter Grimsdale seems to have enjoyed a successful career after his work on the Battlefield books, so good on you, man. At the very least, one can hope games like these are springboards for people's careers to better projects. Usually not, though. We have a mission on another ship which was going pretty slowly until I reached this part where the game trapped me in a swimming section and kept pushing me backwards. I had to backstroke and pray to get past this one. It's a pretty crippling bug considering how linear the game is. Once the fighting starts, it's a series of close quarters engagements, which thanks to these weapon boxes means I can pack a shotgun for this trip. Normally I'd call this lazy. In fact, I'm still going to call it lazy. The designers clearly have no interest in trying to control the flow of weapons through levels, so they gave up and just let the player bring whatever weapons they want. You unlock weapons from completing missions and getting high scores. That's why there's a really distracting score you earn from killing enemies in a single-player game. I already played this one, so I had a bunch of weapons unlocked by default because casually playing the missions means you'll probably end up getting the gold medal. This system won't stop you from just loading up on the one-shot semi-auto sniper you can get, which is honestly for the best. If you're gonna make trash, at least let me make it interesting. Most of the weapons boil down to the expected archetypes. Assault rifles, worse assault rifles, light machine guns, shotguns, snipers, and pistols. Sorry, a pistol. We get one pistol in this game. It's not bad, I'm just not sure why in a multiplayer game that has a dozen or so pistols, its single player would arbitrarily limit me like this. Like, I can spam grenade launchers to my heart's content, but a Glock is just too much to ask. You also can't customize any of the weapons, so whatever sight or muzzle device it comes with is what you're stuck with. The multiplayer features full weapon customization, so again, no reason not to do that. Which is a shame, as gun realism is one of the strengths of Battlefield compared to its competitors. Yet it has few environments to ever really play with them outside of 24/7 Operation Hurt Locker servers. Kinda weird that these Special Forces guys don't pack suppressors in any of their missions, especially covert operations. I mean, it makes sense if you're in a naval environment because of the added barrel length making maneuvers difficult. I guess the designers are aware that having the option would invalidate the other weapons, almost like accessories would be a major factor in weapon choice, making the exclusion of accessory customization all the more confusing. Anyways, Agent Kovacs causes nothing but interpersonal drama before getting killed in a dramatic scene. Next mission, the alleged wife of the Chinese leader joins us against Irish's wishes because now he's not cool with agents or something. The game is packed with boring and unskippable cutscenes with the most milquetoast dramas imaginable. We gotta shoot a flare when some planes are taking off in order to bomb them with the ship's cruise missiles so we can survive getting to the rest of the fleet. We get captured by the Chinese military and the Chinese agent is a triple agent. Cue prison sequence. Irish can't keep his mouth shut and reveals mission critical information when he tries to be sarcastic. Then we meet Dima. You remember Dima? Anybody? He's the Russian guy from Battlefield 3 that pushes you to commit treason and then died when Paris exploded. Yeah, that guy. He's in the Chinese gulag now, probably for reasons elaborated on the Battlefield 3 novelization or some dumb shit like that. I don't get it. Were they trying to make these games a universe? This is the kind of series you get when an out-of-touch executive has a harebrained scheme to try his hand at making an epic narrative, which is why the antagonist of this game is named Admiral Chang. Admiral Chang. We escape prison. It's really rather easy, as once again a Battlefield 3 character is shown to be near omnipotent in their actions, similar to an unenthusiastic stage actor who signals they know their character's about to be killed. Our ship is full steam ahead to the Suez, and we gotta race across the planet to get there. This takes the form of a mostly off-camera road trip across several national borders back to what I assume is Iran. Gotta assume we're still there from the first game. We bail out the local colonel or major or whoever who couldn't be any less plussed about the situation by blowing up the dam, without our knowledge, of course. I love this scene, like the characters think this is a safe distance against the maelstrom of water they just unleashed. Then we get a Fulton extraction and parachute jump down onto the ship before being loaded onto a dinghy to plant explosives, and then we grapple onto a bridge but they don't explode, so it's time for a valiant sacrifice. And did I move too quickly, or did I explain this plot like we're following a whiteboard of exciting set pieces? Now of course lots of shooters get made with level ideas in mind and the plot is worked around those ideas. Most of those ideas tend to revolve around mechanics though, not set pieces. And a lot of shooters know what their strengths are and try to design around those strengths. I feel that vehicles are the battlefield's strengths, and its multiplayer has a lot of them. Tanks, APCs, jeeps, boats, helicopters, jets. But there are no aerial missions because this time the story doesn't have multiple player characters, so it can't justify a jet mission. Otherwise, Wrecker, I still can't believe that's his name, Wrecker would be the most capable human being on the planet. I mean, he's already the point man, marksman, tank commanding squad leader with the power to telepathically dictate orders to his squad. That's one of the new mechanics alongside a rangefinder to mark enemies. You won't usually need the rangefinder as levels are so linear as to not necessitate or even encourage its use. Commanding your squad, on the other hand, is a one-button press that targets all the enemies on screen and unlocks the friendly AI's ability to do damage. No, really, they won't do damage until you do this. You can watch them endlessly fight the AI, immune to bullets but firing blanks all the same. So it's useful to keep the squad busy, but as a result the game looks far more arcadey than Battlefield 3. With that concession made though, we've finally gotten a health bar. It's beautiful, and everything I ever wished for in a piece of user interface that's almost as old as the concept of player health in video games. Congratulations on achieving the most basic of concepts. Unfortunately, the UI is marred with this thing in the top right. Online features, as though the only reason somebody would even be in this mode would be while they wait for a friend to come online or something of that nature. So, what is the point of Battlefield 4? What's its thesis? What are its themes? Well, judging by the writers involved, I can say those are foreign concepts and thereby evil. Wait, he wrote those Chronicles of Riddick games and The Darkness 1? Yeah, somebody keeps requesting those. I'm guessing, if anything, the game is about sacrificing yourself for a greater cause or some meme like that. The squad leader has Wrecker assist his suicide in the first level so they can return some intel implicating the Russians and Chinese in some conspiracy, and at the end the player basically makes a choice of who gets to kill themselves to wrap up the plot. I love this part where Chinese Jesus takes off his head bandages so that the Chinese soldiers recognize him, and instead of shooting him, I guess they had his head trauma transmitted to them instead. Are these faceless soldiers that blindly follow orders without regard for morality, or are these thinking people I've been sending to closed casket funerals with a barrage of 40mm grenades? If you happen to be an Electronic Arts executive thinking about why the Battlefield series never took off like Call of Duty, you should know that it was half right. One of the facets of Battlefield 4's multiplayer I remember working well was the ability to queue as a party and stay together on teams when looking for servers, a basic idea that many modern multiplayer games fail at. Where Battlefield failed was in generating adequate nostalgia in a generation of gamers with its bad single-player campaigns. Not for a lack of trying, mind you. People like to point out bad company after all, but this idea of starving the single-player team to feed the multiplayer development is the root cause of Battlefield's iniquities. The campaign is supposed to be there because at the time it's a box that had to be ticked to justify the price tag. Now, of course, the benefit is what I said at the beginning of this video. Battlefield 4 still has a player count the vast majority of multiplayer games ever released would salivate to have, considering its age. But those aren't fans of the single player. They do exist. Look up Battlefield 4 long play on YouTube and you'll find a few fans that do exist. 4 hours. And so we come to a close. How was your February? Mine was rough. As I told the patrons currently on screen, I took this game as an easy video for a month while I continue to work on the Oblivion video. In fact, most of the work I did this month was on the Oblivion video, so don't think that the other videos I do between now and that big project's release are stealing precious time. not all videos are equal in terms of production value. These patrons have gotten early access to videos as well as status updates and behind the scenes information on my process.